he said, well, this is, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Kenyon. Chris, yeah, everyone knows Chris. Woo!
I'm excited to be here.
Very good. So, Chris, I heard you're going to talk about the big software problem. Is that the big software challenge?
We are going to talk about the big software challenge. Can you hear me at the back?
Yes.
I'm on. Yes.
Go.
Good morning, goedemiddag. It is fantastic to be here in the Netherlands for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I'm one of probably only 100 people in London who have a backfiets. So when I come over here, I see all the bicycles and I get excited. And secondly, I didn't expect to see the announcement of wool-defined networking. And I realized that's now the big thing. Forget software-defined networking, it's wool-defined networking. Okay, so super exciting to be here. I'm going to cover a couple of topics. I'm going to talk about OpenStack in production, and then really attack this problem of what we mean by big software, and why we at Canonical think it's the biggest problem in the industry today. So firstly, who is Canonical? We're the company behind Ubuntu. Can I have a quick show of hands if you know Ubuntu as the operating system? Whoa, that's fantastic. Okay, so Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, there's about 800 of us around the world, and our job is to help people design, support, and build cloud systems using Ubuntu. We really focus across a wide range of activities, so everything from public cloud, private cloud, container usage, and the edge of the network. And in all of what we would call scale-out workloads, so not things you scale up, but things that you scale out, Ubuntu has become the sort of de facto leader in those areas. If a developer has a choice of which OS they get to use, Ubuntu has become that de facto. And if you think about some examples of that, if anybody here a Netflix subscriber, that's all running on Ubuntu. If you go and order a cab on Uber, that's running on Ubuntu. If you go and check DIY project on Pinterest, that's running on Ubuntu. You've got files running on Dropbox, it's running on Ubuntu. So on public cloud, almost 70% of guest workloads are running on Ubuntu. Okay. I'll talk about OpenStack in a second, but if you're using eBay, 20,000 servers running Hadoop to give you all of the search analytics across eBay, all running on Ubuntu. Anyone here watch Lord of the Rings or Avatar? It's all rendered on Ubuntu. Again, a platform of scale out. And if we go to the edge of the network, where if you're really interested in Ubuntu, I'd highly recommend you look at something called Ubuntu Snappy. The edge of the network, we think of the world now just being divided up into elastic cloud and the edge of the network. There right now, we are innovating on what it is to be an operating system at the edge of the network. If you're a top-of-rack switch, that should just be a standard Linux operating system. If you're running a Tesla, in Tesla, that's Ubuntu running all of the infotainment systems. A Google self-driving car now is running on Ubuntu. So we think of that edge of the network, base stations, IoT devices. If DJI, the world's leading manufacturer of drones, are now putting Ubuntu on every single drone because they think of the idea of a drone having an app store. I buy a drone, but I want an app to run on a farm, or I want an app to check for that drone to go along power lines. Suddenly, the way that we think about app stores on devices will not just be the phone, it will even be edge-of-the-network devices. So lots of places where Ubuntu is in production. Let's talk about OpenStack, however. Some of the questions earlier were, is OpenStack ready for production? Anybody here used WebEx in the last 3 months? Yeah? That's running on OpenStack. Cisco WebEx runs on OpenStack on Ubuntu. Anybody here actually probably don't have an answer to that, but if you make a 911 call in Croatia right now, or Slovakia, on Deutsche Telekom's network, the IMS core that runs that system is running on OpenStack. Okay. If you have bought anything on Walmart in the last 2 years, that's 100,000 core OpenStack cloud in production. So when you ask this question, is OpenStack ready for production? There are certainly some ways to do it and some ways not to do it. And its readiness for average enterprises is getting better day by day. But in production, absolutely. Yahoo Japan, that's their hosting business. They run 30,000 virtual machines on OpenStack for their customers. And they have already upgraded 3 times to different versions of OpenStack underneath that cloud. So that's been in production for over 2 years. So, what's our role in that? In many cases, we're just the operating system underneath there. So I took Ericsson. All of Ericsson's telephone equipment going forward will be shipping with what's called the cloud execution environment that ships with Ubuntu. If you get rack-space private cloud now, you can get that with Ubuntu. But in many cases, companies are now saying, actually, I'd like to have the operating system and OpenStack together from a distribution. I think there was a question in the earlier feedback was, do I take from upstream or do I take a distribution recommended, a wrapped version of OpenStack? The truth is you can do either, but I think the trend and the economics are that it's easier to take it from a distributor, be that SUSE, Red Hat, Canonical, or Mirantis. Like taking a wrapped distribution is going to be an easier way to consume OpenStack going forward. Some other examples I wanted to call out here. Anyone know LivePerson? They're Israeli. They do customer service agents and many websites. Again, all of that infrastructure is running on OpenStack. So taking OpenStack and having it run from a distribution is that second bar of customers. That third bar, that gray bar where I put BootStack, and there's just some of the customers who are using that service. BootStack is what we call build, operate, and optionally transfer OpenStack. So for some customers, and some of you, you'll say, look, I want to get an open cloud instantiated in our business. I want to make it available to users so they can get going with it. I don't want to wait until my team feel total mastery of that cloud. I'd like to have somebody run it remotely. And ourselves and other people in the ecosystem offer that remote managed service for OpenStack. So it's OpenStack in your data center, but it's being managed by a third party. And that gives you time to build up OpenStack expertise. More importantly, it accelerates the speed at which you're making OpenStack available to internal users. Ultimately, the goal here is to make modern cloud available in a private cloud setting for the enterprise to stop that leakage of workloads out onto public clouds, and by simply getting it up and running in your own data center, you can start that process. All right. So why have we done well in this space? This is actually sort of talking about the challenges of OpenStack. OpenStack, the big change over the next 5 years is that OpenStack will become fully automated, both the install and the operations of OpenStack. At the moment, there has been too much consultancy going on, too much hand crafting of OpenStack. That has to go away. This has to be a push-button experience in terms of install, upgrading, and normal maintenance tasks. Second big challenge is interoperability. So the great news is there's a fantastic ecosystem of compute vendors, storage vendors, networking vendors, SDNs, lots of different options. And the bad news is there's lots of different options. How do we guarantee quality when we have so much interoperability? At Canonical, we run something called OIL, the OpenStack Interoperability Lab, where we have over 40 vendors with their hardware and software in the lab. We build 3,500 OpenStack clouds every month in that lab, okay? Across 150 different variations of compute, networking, and storage, and we're giving that feedback every day to vendors. We don't just take the released versions of OpenStack, we take the daily build of the next version of OpenStack. So that the vendor, be it HP, EMC, Scale.io, they know that their components are all going to work together when the next release of OpenStack comes out. It is possible, with automation, to offer flexibility and interoperability and make good, strong promises on quality. Finally, two other topics I want to talk about on OpenStack. One is economics. We believe any OpenStack cloud will have to be benchmarked economically against public cloud. Not just in terms of licensing costs, but in terms of total cost of operations. If we're fanatical at Canonical about driving towards automation, it's because we believe that without automation, we don't get the right economics of private cloud. And you can claim you're in a special industry with special reasons why you can't be on public cloud. We've got to be totally confident that with full TCO models, we're beating public cloud. Otherwise, this fails. And finally, LXD. So we think containers in OpenStack is super exciting. And I would strongly encourage, we're doing a talk this afternoon about LXD, which is a machine container as opposed to an application container, and how you can get huge performance increases by using containers as a base for OpenStack. We've been doing control services in containers for 2 years, but this is actually about running containers underneath and using a driver, a Nova driver to LXD, as opposed to using a Nova driver to KVM, and some huge performance improvements there. Okay, so that's OpenStack. I've raced through it. I want to touch on a different topic. Big software. Free software is becoming very expensive. Okay, what do we mean by that? I mean, the cost of software is dropping. You can go to GitHub, there are lots and lots of options. The challenge is around operations. Okay? This year you have to set up OpenStack. It's 10 plus services. Maybe then it's Cloud Foundry, 22 plus services. Then it's big data, Hadoop with maybe Spark and Storm and Kafka for data ingestion. That's going to be 7 or 8 services. Maybe in your organization you've been told to look at machine learning and you're taking TensorFlow and getting that set up, or Kubernetes. Lots and lots of services. Your organization is asking you to set up more software, and that software in itself is becoming more complicated. Okay? It's the phase change of modern software. It's not 2 or 3 apps that are linked, it's multiple services. They're not being deployed on 1 or 2 servers, they're being deployed on tens, if not hundreds of services. What's more, you deploy certain microservices or services on some, you want Ceph on these nodes, and then you want Nova on other nodes. This is a difficult problem. It is a phase change. You can't just hire more consultants to solve the problem. We have to change how we attack the problem. Okay? We call this the age of big software. Just like the age of big data, what did we mean when we said big data? We meant data had got too big. It wasn't that it was big, it was too big for the way that we were managing data in relational databases. For modern enterprise, software has got too big. If your answer at Shell to having a software problem 5 years ago was, I'd hire a few more consultants from Accenture, it just doesn't work that way right now. Accenture, with all due respect to them, only have X number of experts in any single piece of software. We have to attack the way that we're consuming software. So scarcity has moved from the code to operational knowledge. We're sort of privileged as a company because we see lots of very large-scale operators. And the interesting thing about them is none of them are using configuration management. They've all moved to what you can describe as model-driven, reusable, open-source operations. They found a way of taking a model and sharing it internally and possibly sharing it from externally in. So that when they have to set up a new service, this is pretty simple. You know, you're all architects apparently, or hanging around according to the previous slide. What do? You get a whiteboard, you say, here are the services. Wouldn't it be great if you could take that whiteboard and actually turn it into something that you could deploy? So this is a tool that we've been developing for 4 years called Juju. It's open source. And you take an application, you model it, and that model contains what you need to both deploy and operate that software. So if it was a database, Postgres or MySQL, you would have an action, the common way of deduping, a common way of backing up. Suddenly this allows you to take expertise about how to deploy software and bring it into the organization. It doesn't define the architecture of where you deploy it. So a model, and there we've taken individual charms, we've grouped them together as what we call a bundle. That could be deployed on different containers, different virtual machines. The actual architecture of how you deploy services is separate from the model of how they deploy. Okay? And the beauty of this approach is you can model out Hadoop. Or that's OpenStack with Contrail. You know, how do we build 4,000 OpenStack clouds a month? We don't do it by hand. It's a model. And we can take Contrail, or we can take Metacora, we can take Cisco Nexus, we can take any SDN, 8 SDNs, put them in there into the model and deploy. So model-driven applications, that's, if you're, any telcos in the room? Anybody from a telephone communication service provider, a couple of people? That's an EPC, Evolved Packet Core, fully deployable on OpenStack. Once you have the model, the great thing about these models is you can deploy them on Amazon, on Google, or on OpenStack. This is a great thing for OpenStack, because guess what? As soon as you've deployed OpenStack, the next question from your developers will be, how do I get X service set up, or Y service? How do I get Hadoop? How do I get machine learning? Once you have a model-driven framework like Juju running on top of an OpenStack cloud, suddenly hundreds of different workloads, both open and proprietary, available for you to then deploy on top. Okay. I'm going to simply wrap up, because I'm conscious on time. It says 0. Okay. 2 thoughts. OpenStack is ready for production, okay, but focus on automation, focus on interoperability, and focus on the economics of it. Look at LexD. There's a talk this afternoon by my colleague, Ignacio Fernandez. He's doing a talk at 14:20 about using containers under OpenStack, and also a talk at 1:45 by Marcin on using OpenStack in enterprises. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Michel, some questions are coming in. I think I saw some questions coming in.
There were some questions coming in, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. There they are.
Well, which one should we do? Which one do you interest you the most?
Well, for me, it's always interesting how the safety is guaranteed.
Yeah, how do you guarantee the safety of the data? Moses Horneman asked that.
That is an architecture issue for you, in terms of how you set up your OpenStack cloud. What I will say to you right now is that all of the major security agencies in the Western world are using OpenStack in one way or another right now. And I can assure you that if AT&T and Deutsche Telekom are using OpenStack in deployment for telco-grade workloads, I can assure you it can be locked down in a way that you can feel very confident at an enterprise level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm just not an expert. But if this is an open source project, it feels, for me, I'm not an expert, like, is that safe as, let's say, a competitor which is not open source? Is there a difference?
This is an age-old argument about open source versus proprietary
maybe it's a
software.
Good,
no, it's
good
a good
argument.
one. It's an age one. I think the evidence is pretty clear. Many eyes on code make for better code, and the security track record from SUSE, Red Hat, from Ubuntu is fantastic in terms of dealing with zero-day exploits.
Mm-hmm. Because Dion has a little bit of the same question as well.
His question is slightly different. So people often think about Ubuntu as the community distribution. I really want to explode that idea. Ubuntu is one code base. And if you want to use it for free and never talk to Canonical and deploy it, you're welcome. You really are welcome. We think that's fantastic. If you're using it in a mission-critical environment, like AT&T or Deutsche Telekom, I would strongly recommend you talk to us. And there is a reason. There's a reason why 800 people around the world. We have a business. Most of that is about supporting cloud customers. We're unusual as a company. We offer support to cloud-native companies like Box, but also much more traditional enterprises.
So, Michel, can you shift to the previous comments of the
biggest question?
The biggest question we have around using open.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Can you, Chris? Can you pick one out? Do you think, that's the one I can answer to? We can scroll because there are lots of questions there. Is it mature enough? Han and Ben are sitting next to each other.
I can see. Okay, I'm going to pick up on a couple. So there was a question earlier about big tent projects versus core. Mm-hmm. If you're nervous about OpenStack, don't focus on the core. Simple as that. The core is what all of the distributions are focused on making sure is rock solid. Mm-hmm. The truth is there are projects in big tent which are very, very early, are not ready for production. Mm-hmm. It is fantastic that those projects exist. And it's fantastic that there's innovation happening. But just because a project is in the OpenStack big tent or big umbrella does not mean you should be thinking about deploying it. Okay? Right. Focus on the core. Second question. There's a saying in engineering, if something's hard, do it often. Okay? Right now, if you want to start with OpenStack, get started. Stop planning. Get 4 or 5 boxes up and running and just get going. And challenge your team to be building, tearing it down, building it up, tearing it down. Experiment with different layouts of Nova, Ceph, how you want to architect it. But if your team are cautious and are handcrafting and go, ooh, I don't want to touch it, that's a bad sign. So focus on doing the stuff you find hard often.
Please stay on stage,
sure.
because I want to ask some questions, Michel. We prepared earlier.
Yeah.
And you can grab your phone again, because you need to vote 3 times. And this is all about using OpenStack in production.
Yes.
So
First one?
Yeah, first one. Yeah, let's grab the first. What's the main reason you consider OpenStack? We really want your answer to that. Is it because it's cheaper? Because it prevents vendor lock-in? Because it innovates more? Maybe it has the best performance? Or other reasons?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have the best performance. Do you see that? Nobody says it has the best performance.
That shouldn't be the reason you move. I mean, OpenStack with containers is now blazing performance. Okay, so but that shouldn't be the reason you move. The reason you should be moving to public cloud, to OpenStack-based cloud internally, is around innovation and agility. It really is.
And agility, do you mean the vendor lock-in? Because that is maybe a little bit agility
the speed
as well?
at which you speed at which you as a team innovate. Look, WhatsApp sold for $19 billion 3 years ago, and everyone gets very focused on the $19 billion.
Right, yeah. I can
Very
imagine.
quickly, the number that I'm always interested in with WhatsApp is 32. Why 32? Anyone know 32?
It's your age.
No? I turned 42 yesterday.
Oh, okay. Congratulations.
32 was the total number of engineers that WhatsApp had when they were acquired by Facebook. That's 32 engineers for all development, all production services, which is voice, text, and video messaging. They had 520 million users. Do the maths. That's one person for every 14 million users. That gives AT&T the right to employ 5 people for all voice, video, and text messaging.
All right. Okay.
Now, if you're a CFO in the room, you're going to get excited. Oh, I can save money. You shouldn't be excited about the saving money. What you should be terrified about is small software teams go faster. A team of 32 can move much faster than a team of 500.
All right.
So.
Okay. So the next question,
Next
Michel?
question is about the risks.
Yeah, but the risks.
What risk do you associate the most with OpenStack?
Is it loss of control over data? Is it loss of management control? Use in production of unproven techniques? Uncertainty about the future of OpenStack? Or other risks? Ooh. Let's see. Use in production of unproven techniques. That seems to be worrisome. What do you think?
I'm going to be a broken record here. OpenStack is coming. The question is, do you get on it super early, which was 4 years ago, about the right time, which is now, or too late, which is probably next year?
All right, but we talk about... all right.
Okay,
All right.
and I want to just challenge one idea. People think about OpenStack in the data center. Something Alan said earlier. OpenStack is just the norm of doing Linux now. It's actually nothing special. It's just Linux at scale. Just like now we think of Linux as being in the data center running Google and also running on our phone, OpenStack will be sitting in a plane in 2 years' time, on a train in 2 years' time, at a base station in 2 years' time. It is just the new norm.
Right.
Get used to it.
Okay, we're getting used to it. Warm round of applause. Chris Kenyon, thank you. All right. So